Hi there. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the spiritual meaning of scoliosis. That is to say, looking at the sort of more energetic underpinnings of scoliosis and the fact that pain, problems, challenges, issues of a physical nature, health issues, emotional issues, they all can have as their cause a way that our system goes into defense and walls off and binds up energy in our system, bound up energy. And so scoliosis is tied into this sort of bound up energy and a source of bound up energy. And if that's not sort of revelation enough, it's also intelligent energy that gets bound up in that process. And so and that is energy that is poised to do work, energy that we can use if we can integrate it, if we can activate it and integrate it. It can be energy that becomes fuel for transforming us. And so scoliosis can have both an energetic cause and it can be fuel for our transformation. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. Before we get there, my name is Dr. Jay Eaker from the BioSoul Integration Center, and I help people integrate their soul's essence and their soul's gifts so they can express their soul's essence and gifts through these physical bodies onto the physical plane and express their authentic selves and share their soul's gifts and essence with others. If you find this video interesting, please like it, please share it, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's really helpful. And do the social thing wherever you find this video, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc., so on and so forth. Do the social thing there, like it, share it, and so on. You can find this episode on an audio podcast form at the BioSoul Integration Podcast, wherever you listen to your audio podcasts. This episode and the BioSoul Integration Podcast can be found there if you're into audio podcasts. I've also written a book called If It Didn't Hurt, How to Resolve Your Pain and Discover Your Life Purpose, which is kind of the ultimate guide towards realizing the pain, the problem, the challenge as a portal to soul and transforming through that so that you can share your gifts with the planet. You can find that at biosoulintegration.com. There's an option there to get the first chapter for free and read that instantly, and you can also buy it there. So let's get into this thing here, the spiritual meaning of scoliosis. First of all, what is scoliosis? Well, in order to help demonstrate, I have my assistant here. Scoliosis is, in general, a lateral curvature of the spine. A lateral curvature of the spine that it comes in many degrees. It can be slight and it can be more extreme. Slight to the degree that it's barely noticeable. The fact is that everyone has some lateral curvature through the spine. No one's spine is perfectly symmetrical, just like no person's face is perfectly symmetrical. No one's spine is perfectly symmetrical in that lateral direction. But then, of course, there are situations and circumstances where there's such an extreme, curvature, lateral curvature in the spine that it crowds organs or, impedes movement or things like that cause some major problems. But in general, scoliosis is a lateral curvature of the spine. So I have this spine here. This is the bottom. This is your sacrum and your pelvis here. This is the base of your skull. So this is the top of your spine. This is the bottom of your spine. This would be the back of your spine, and this would be the front. That's kind of the direction we're looking at it from. And so if I turn it, you notice that there are these curves in the spine, and there are supposed to be curves in your spine. In that direction, in that sort of flexion extension direction, it's natural, and you're supposed to have these curves. Actually, it's a problem when those curves are not there. When they're flat, that creates another problem. So there's supposed to be curves there, but in this lateral direction, side to side direction, scoliosis is a lateral curvature of the spine, and that lateral curvature can show up in any part of the spine. It sounds like often it shows up kind of in the middle part of the spine. And because the spine is curved, has these flexion extension curves in it, a scoliosis can often involve sort of twisting also in the spine. And so that's kind of in general what scoliosis is. So we could talk about the kind of causes, some general causes and kinds of scoliosis. There's something called congenital scoliosis, and what that generally has to do is with a abnormal rib or spinal bone formation. If you see these bones that come off the side here, that's where the ribs come off of there. If there's abnormal rib formation, maybe ribs are shorter on one side, it can cause scoliosis in the spine. If the spinal vertebra here are maybe just deformed in some way, that can cause a lateral curvature of the spine. Then there's something called neuromuscular scoliosis, and that happens generally in disorders that affect the muscles and nerves, the body's ability to sort of communicate to the muscles through the nervous system, and that happens in things like cerebral palsy and muscular dystrophy and spina bifida. Then there is degenerative scoliosis, and that just is a case where we get our bodies get old and worn out, and because of that, the wear and tear, the discs get the discs in here lose their lose the fluid, and they degenerate, and that can cause a lateral curvature in the spine. And then there is something called idiopathic scoliosis. And idiopathic scoliosis is kind of like the most common form of scoliosis. It happens generally in adolescence around the age of 10. And that's why, in general, they'd start to do scoliosis screenings. I don't know if they do that anymore, but when I was a kid, I certainly remember going to a nurse came and she did scoliosis screenings where they had you bend over and then looked at the two sides, kind of looked to see if there was muscles raised up on one side of your spine that indicated a scoliosis. And so that's called idiopathic scoliosis, and that accounts for like 80 to 90% of scoliosis, is this kind of scoliosis that just shows up normally around puberty, around the age of 10. And idiopathic means, it's a fancy medical term for I don't know. Idiopathic, it means we don't know why it shows up. It's scoliosis of unknown origin and cause, and that is the large majority of scoliosis is unknown. Why it happened, and those generally occur around puberty, around 10 years of age in adolescence. And so I think that's kind of interesting that the largest portion of scoliosis is kind of unknown cause and unknown origin. And so I think this idea that I'm talking about, this sort of spiritual meaning, spiritual cause of scoliosis that I'm about to explain to you, kind of accounts for, or is a thing that can sort of account for the fact that there's, the large majority of scoliosis is of unknown origin. And in order to explain that, I want to look through the lens of this sort of more spiritual, energetic orientation, context for scoliosis. And so I want to kind of talk about this sort of like body, mind, spirit theory that I have. And not that it's necessarily my theory. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, of course, when it comes to all this. But I have written a book that goes deep into this sort of like body, mind, spirit theory of how things show up in our bodies. And so I'm going to take some ownership of it. But like I've said in many of my videos, many of my blog posts, there is about 2 to 4 weeks, after conception, this thing called, what I call the primal brain, which is this sort of foundational layer of our nervous system, comes online. And this primal brain is really just feeling into the energetic back office of all the people and the culture around us, and it's gathering information about how to do this human thing. And that happens because we rely on those people and that culture for our survival. It's kind of imperative that we fit in with the culture. You know, if someone is an outlier in different ways, I guess thinking about it, scoliosis, you know, physical deformities can be one way that we end up being an outlier, that we can sort of, you know, show up on the radar as an outlier. But if you're expressing your fullest self, you know, if you're expressing your fullest authentic self, that kind of pegs you as an outlier. And so there's this inherent thing that's built in that we want to sort of fit in with the herd. And so our nervous system is really feeling into these people and the culture around us. And what we pick up when we feel into them is that there's ways in which the people around us they've fragmented themselves. It's not okay to be whole. It's not okay to express a full, whole version of ourselves. We need to fragment ourselves, and we need to sort of like dial down parts of ourselves and dial up other parts. And so we've judged parts of ourselves as good and parts of ourselves as bad, and we've walled parts off, and we don't express certain parts and the energy associated with them. And that's what we feel when we feel into the people around us. And because we rely on them for our survival, we adopt that same way of being, that same way of holding ourselves and being in our bodies and in our lives. And that shows up as those survival programs show up on a physical level, in that we use muscle tension to wall off these parts of ourselves and the energy associated with them. We use our posture. We use our spine, the shape of our spine, which is apropos to scoliosis. We twist off our spine. We increase the curve in this direction. We might increase the curve in that direction to keep parts of ourselves separate, to keep ourselves from expressing a fuller expression of certain parts of ourselves. And so we use the shape of our spine to do that, to redirect energy, to disconnect from parts of ourselves, apropos to scoliosis. That puts a limit on the range and depth of emotion that we'll give ourselves permission to feel and express. That, putting a limit on the range and depth of emotion, ties into the limited version of stories and belief systems that we have about ourselves and the world. And all of that sort of affects our behavior. It affects how we show up in the world. It affects our capacity to, again, express and behave in a way that's in alignment with our authentic self, such that we are expressing our soul's gifts and our soul's essence, and sharing those gifts on the planet. So that's kind of this body, mind, spirit theory of things that I'm working from in the work that I do, and it sort of explains how the physical is connected to the emotional, is connected to the mental, is connected to the spiritual. And so the part about there being the bound up energy, you know, when we're looking through a certain sort of more allopathic or medical lens, you tend to see things as, you know, a symptom, as a problem that needs to be fixed. So we have scoliosis. Some of the ways that they try to fix scoliosis is to kids wear a brace that sort of locks their spine into a certain position. In extreme cases where the scoliosis is really bad, or it like keeps continuing for whatever reason, they actually do surgery and they put rods in the spine. They screw rods into the vertebra, screw a rod into the vertebra, and it keeps the part of the, you know, they straighten the spine out and keep it straight with a steel rod. So in general, in that allopathic model, we're sort of like looking at things, and, you know, and that's not a terrible thing necessarily. You know, my daughter, you know, the medical world has sort of like saved my daughter on a few occasions. First, when, you know, my wife was giving birth to my daughter, the birth process kind of petered out for whatever reason, and they, you know, used their medical magic to induce labor and kind of kickstart things into gear. And you know, and my wife got an infection, and they, you know, so they saved my wife and my daughter on a certain level. And then later on, my daughter got cancer. And we looked at alternative methods, for helping her, but none of the alternative things that we could find were as clear as the medical world. And the medical world said, you know what, if we do this, this, and this, she has a 95% chance of being just fine. It was a kind of cancer that was kind of rare and had a really good outcome in general, but we did end up doing chemo and radiation, and she had to have surgery. She had to have a kidney removed where the tumor was. And so again, they saved her life. So I'm not saying that the medical world is all bad, but I'm just saying that in general, they are looking through a certain lens, and that lens has kind of permeated our society, I would say, and that we tend to look at anything that is uncomfortable or unsavory as a problem that we need to get rid of. So if it is scoliosis, if it is emotional issues, depression, anxiety, if it is pain in the body, if it is health issues of various sorts, we tend to want to get rid of that, right? Seek to stop that from happening. But from a more spiritual perspective, from a more energetic perspective, often these things are caused by energy that is bound up in the system. Parts of ourselves that we've walled off at a certain point in our lives, whether while we're starting when we were in the womb or continuing on when we were little kids. Often the things that happen to us when we're little kids are a source of suffering later on in our lives. But that energy, parts of ourselves that we've walled off, there's a way in which life is constantly wanting that to come to the surface of consciousness, because there is, bound up energy is poised to do work. There is wisdom in that energy. If we've separated ourselves from parts of ourselves, it's like we're not functioning from a whole version of ourselves. There are parts of ourselves that we are pushing away. Just like, if you have a collaboration between people at a workplace or something like that, often if you have more than one mind working on a problem, then people can do amazing things. And it's the same way with us. There are parts of ourselves that we've walled off and pushed away, and if those parts and the energy associated with them could be integrated, we can function from a more whole place, and we can do some pretty great things as far as helping others and with our gifts and the gifts of those parts that we might be pushing away. But maybe I digress. So anyway, my point is that pain, that problem is associated with bound up energy that is poised to do work. And so when looking through the more spiritual lens, we look at that energy that's bound up in the system as potential energy. And indeed, with scoliosis, the cause probably of a lot of the scoliosis, this idiopathic or unknown origin scoliosis that shows up around adolescence, the cause of that is probably, in some general sense, the programs that we've stored in our system. So the cause, but then later on can also be a source of energy that can transform our lives, can become fuel. So first, the source of the origin of the problem, again, these survival patterns that we create in our system. Let's say, it's probably no mistake that the scoliosis starts happening around puberty, because again, there are certain developmental stages that unfold throughout the course of our lifetimes, and we learned that we put together a certain amount of dots to walk and to talk, and then puberty starts happening, and puberty is like a huge developmental stage, right? A huge transformation. Think about it, that the huge transformation that happens during puberty, the amount of change, and maybe one of the most, change-packed portions of our life is puberty, the change that we go through in puberty. And certainly when we go through puberty, there's certain parts of our physiology that get, lit up, that get ramped up. In particular, our pelvis, right? The energy from our pelvis and our sacrum, this part of our body. The hormones start to kick things into gear. Speaking from my own personal experience, I just remember puberty being like, holy smokes, I'm sitting on a rocket. All of a sudden, it's like, I'm sitting on a rocket. Like, what do I do with this energy, right? There's a lot of energy that it suddenly pours into our bodies and lives during that time. And a lot of it has to do with the pelvis, right? Like our sexual center. But the pelvis, the sacrum, is a lot about the part of us that knows who we are and why we're here. That energy, that creative energy that comes to the surface around puberty, carries with it the sign and signal and signature of who I am and why I'm here. It's during that time that I remember really kind of like searching, trying to, in my personal experience, to figure out like where I fit in, like, am I this kind of person? Am I this kind of person? Do I fit in with this group or this group? You're really dealing with questions of identity, right? Like, who am I and why am I here, right? And there's a lot of powerful energy associated with that. That is designed to move through our spine, through our heart, and be expressed through our heart. However, if we find ourselves surrounded by people or situation where, their system says, when we're born, the family, the culture that we're born into, their system says that energy is not to be trusted. That energy gets us in trouble, or that energy is whatever it is. This is who you're supposed to be. This is what you're supposed to be, why you're here and what you're supposed to be. We can get this subtle energetic message that it's not okay to be who we are and why we're here. It's not okay to express that. We need to tone that down. Or, again, in my personal experience, I grew up in a conservative Christian household in the Midwest. And, there were certain ways in which there were Lutherans. We were Lutherans, and, Lutherans, my experience was, were not exactly, anything that was sort of like sensual was to be toned down. It was taboo, right? And, there's a number of experiences that I had that I remember picking up that signal from an early age. I won't go into details, but picking up that signal from an early age that, this sexual energy, creative energy, that power of that energy is kind of like taboo and not to be, not to be expressed really openly. That's the kind of thing in our culture and the people around us that causes us to sort of like, this part of me is like, that's not okay. That's, that's taboo. I need to tone down that part of myself. And if that pattern is there when puberty happens, when all of this energy sort of like lights up and comes to the surface, it's like, so, wow, we need to do something with this. But there's a part of us that says, this isn't safe. It's not okay. We need to tone that down. We need to wall that off. We need to not express it. There might be a program in there that says it's not okay to let this energy move through the spine and be expressed into the world, right? And so there's this subtle pattern in our system that says, let's pinch this off or not let this be expressed. And again, that could show up in a number of ways. That bound up energy, the friction in our system as a result, can show up as health issues. It can show up as emotional issues. But certainly it can show up as back pain, and one of the ways it could show up is scoliosis. That is a strategy that our system could sort of adopt to protect ourselves, because this is done out of a perceived need to survive, because we want to fit in with the people around us. It's very important that we fit in with the culture and the people around us. And so if it's a culture that says your identity is, this is what your identity is, it's not that, or don't express this creative sexual energy, sensual energy, that's not safe to experience or express, or things of that nature. This is not who you are and why you're here. This is who you are and why you're here. And it makes us uncomfortable if you express, you're not supposed to be an artist, you're supposed to be a doctor or whatever, like we pick up these subtle messages. And if those programs are baked into our culture and the people around us, and then thus our system feels like it needs to adhere to that out of perceived need to survive, out of a safety imperative. Scoliosis is one of the ways that our system might choose to deal with that, by pinching, not letting this be expressed through the body, as a way to sort of like tone down or sequester energy. And so there were the two things that I mentioned there about this. Is one of this, like, what are the causes, the meaning behind it, but there's also another aspect of that when viewed through this sort of energetic lens, this more spiritual lens, is that there is potential energy that's created by that. Like if you have a teeter-totter and you hold down one side of the teeter-totter, and then you try to push on the other side of the teeter-totter, that creates pressure, tension in the system, right? Well, this survival imperative that says it's not okay to express certain parts of ourselves, and we're going to separate this part from this part, let's say, and with the scoliosis, that creates tension in our system, that creates potential energy. And potential energy is poised to do work. And in this spiritual context, it has the potential to transform us physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And so the energy that's bound up in scoliosis, or in anything, a health issue, an emotional issue, a pain issue, can become fuel when seen through this sort of spiritual lens, and experienced through this spiritual lens can be fuel that transforms your life. So from that sort of spiritual meaning lens of scoliosis, it's no mistake. Like, we signed up for it on some level, and it contains actually the lessons, and it contains the energy and the wisdom that we need to sort of accomplish what it is that we came here to accomplish. And so, like any health issue, like any pain, like any problem or challenge, it can be utilized. So in order to utilize that, I would consider, what are the things that scoliosis brings up for you? Is it pain? Is it tension? Is it worried about appearance? Is it feel like there's something wrong with you? Is it fear? Is it, are you comparing yourself to others? Are you aware of your, a capacity or an incapacity to participate in, physical activity or something like that? Like, what are the things, how does it affect you? What are the things that it brings up for you? Fear, frustration, anger, worry, feeling like you're not good enough, the themes around that. And our goal then, our work then, would be to embody those things. And by embody them, I mean, let's say you're experiencing feeling not worthy because of the scoliosis. What is the sensation of not worthy in your body? There's a physical sensation that you can, if you pay close enough attention to, that you can track in your body. Does it bring up frustration or anger about? What is the sensation of that anger in your body? That energy contains the wisdom that you need to maybe resolve the scoliosis, but certainly resolve the issue around it and extract the wisdom for your life from that issue. I said resolve. Well, it's possible that it changes and goes away. That's very possible. I have a client who has changed their scoliosis to a great degree through this work and other embodiment work. But when looked through this sort of spiritual lens, there are even cooler things that can happen than just having a problem go away. There are, believe it or not, even more empowering results, empowering things that can happen. If the other things, if the mental, emotional spiritual aspects of a thing change and transform, sometimes that can be more compelling than if the physical problem went away, when looked through this sort of spiritual lens. So again, if you want to utilize the scoliosis for your spiritual growth, again, look at the themes around it. What do they bring up for you? And bring your attention to those, the felt sense of those things in your body. And that's it. Just by doing that, every nanosecond that you're doing that, you're integrating those parts of ourselves that got pushed away, the parts of ourselves that are sort of like secluded and sequestered through the scoliosis, you know? Whether it's your identity, what have you. And there are techniques that could be used to help you that I'm just going to mention briefly. Of course, I'd be remiss if I did not mention my own work, BioSoul Integration, which hits on all of those aspects, which is used to sort of extract the spiritual juice from all sorts of problems, pains, challenges, and contacts all of those areas, the physical, mental, emotional, and ties, spiritual, ties all those things together, which is necessary if you want to really resolve, really collapse a pattern that got formed in your system, that got started, maybe when we were in the womb, little kids. Something called, and these are things that you can look up, and this is stuff that I've sort of integrated into my work. I come through the realm of chiropractic, and then I found something called network spinal analysis or network chiropractic and practiced that for years. Then over the course of time, it kind of turned into my own thing, which I call BioSoul Integration. But part of the things that I integrated when I started doing online work with people was something called parts work. Parts work is a therapy technique that sort of takes advantage of the fact that we've fragmented ourselves, and it's about coming into a relationship with those fragments. It's very somatically body-oriented. Also something called brain spotting. Brain spotting is also a therapy technique that's very somatically oriented, that's about the energy that gets stored away in our brain as a result of traumas and hurts that we've experienced, and how that's tied into the retina of our eye. And so looking at certain places in your visual field connect you with that energy, and inside of a container of kindness and non-judgment, you can start to unpack and integrate that energy, that bound up energy as a result of the trauma. Okay, so I don't think I want to recap too much, but from the spiritual, energetic context of scoliosis, it's bound up intelligent energy that is poised to do work, is poised to transform your body and your life. And so by bringing your attention to that, your kind attention, you can do that. So I hope this video felt useful. Please like it, please share it, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to check out my book, you can do that at biosoulintegration.com, and check the audio podcast version of this out. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and I look forward to helping you express more life. Have a great day.